Buying your first or forever home doesn't make any sense yet this year. With mortgage rates still hovering around 7%, what's your best move? Our money expert, Mike Koyanen with Principal Preservation Services, joins us now. Good to see you again, Mike.
Good to be here, Liz.
So what do you say? Does it make any sense for potential buyers to make the jump? And talk about that. What should they consider first?
Yeah, we're talking about the interest rates here. They're the same as when I was on your program last month. The average, national average on the 30-year is 7.23%. The 15-year is 6.76%, which is 2.5 times where they were back in 2021. Prices of homes have gone up as well. So when you look at a $450,000 house back in the day, that used to be a very, very nice house. It still is, but you don't get as much for your money today. And if you put 20% down on that house to avoid the private mortgage insurance, you're paying about $1,000 more today in interest than what you would have paid 3 years ago on a $450,000 house. So that's one thing to consider when you're looking to buying or selling and buying as well.
Give us your best prediction. I know this is always tough to do on where the rates are going to go, Mike. And then also, I think a lot of people are wondering if the Federal Reserve will ultimately be stepping in.
After 11 rate hikes in the last couple of years, and we're at a 20-year high for interest rates, 2-decade high. So when we look at that, it's frustrating because the Federal Reserve was going to drop rates in March, and then he said no, and then June and no, and September no, and then yes, and then no, and now it's a maybe. And some experts think it might not even be till March of next year for some reprieve in the interest rates. That's kind of the negative side of the inflation piece in the Federal Reserve. But most people are in the consensus that rates are going to come down on the mortgages and at 6% or lower in 2025. So with all the negativity of interest rates or where they're at, mortgage rates were around 8, if you remember. They got as high as 8. Now they're in that low 7s. Now we can get to that 6% or lower next year. It might make sense to buy that house and then look at refinancing that house next year, the year after, and save yourself a few $100s a month of interest.
What should buyers and sellers also consider when making such a big decision? I mean, who doesn't love a good pros and cons list, I guess, Mike?
Well, for the sellers, you have to understand there's supply and demand. And right now, there's not a lot of supply, so the demand is still high. It's a seller's market. And so when you're putting your house on the market, you're probably going to get an offer really quick. And so that's great. And so some sellers are saying, but there might be swapping house. They might be upsizing or downsizing to their next house. They don't want to get into a mortgage at this rate. But you have to understand, you might get more for your house next year by waiting, but the house you're buying is going to be much more as well. And for the buyers, housing prices are going up and up each year. The national average housing prices went up 5.5% last year. Wisconsin alone, property values increased 65% in just the last 4 years. So by waiting, you might be paying $25,000 next year or $50,000 maybe for that same house. So you have to make those calculated risks in buying that house.
Any last tips then for current or future homeowners, Mike?
I think getting your ducks in a row, and that's, there's a big difference of pre-qualification letters with the lenders, banks, or pre-approval letter. I don't think that much highly of the pre-qualification letters because it just says you fit the parameters, you give some basic information, the banks give you this letter that says you're pre-qualified, but you didn't go through the process. And there's some disclosures in there that you have a way out if you really don't get qualified for the loan. So you're just wasting a lot of people's time. And when you get to that time of making that big purchase, you want to make sure that they're going to take your offer serious. And a pre-approval letter says you went through that process. You gave them the W-2s, the pay stubs, the bank statements. Your money has been seasoned for the amount of time the banks need that. And it's actually worth a lot more. So if you have two offers that are identical and one's pre-qualified, one's pre-approved, as a seller, you're going to want that pre-approval letter. You're more apt to take that as well. So make sure you get your ducks in a row and actually go through the process, to say underwriting process, because a lot of things come up, even though it looks like it fits the parameters. There could be some random things that show up in your credit report that might not even be yours. Could be because you have a common name, which happened to my friend a few years ago. Had a very common name, had bad debt on there from somebody else, and he had to take some time to get that off his credit report. So get your stuff in order.
Great advice, as always. Mike Koyanen from Principal Preservation Services. Thanks for joining me. We'll look for your advice again next month.
Thanks, Liz. Appreciate it.